What's up? What's up? What's up? Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the Generation Gap, Bridging the Gap podcast with Roydell and Roydell. I'm Roydell II. This is my dad, Roydell Sr., and we're about to get into it. Some of you guys at this point in time have probably seen some of the other episodes, so you know what it's about. We speak about different topics where we're looking to bridge the gaps, have conversations that father and son, brother, sister, family member, colleague can also partake in, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward as a collective. Don't want to get too much into it now. I really want to jump into this conversation because this is one that hits close to home, let's say, and it's related to sports, it's related to family, it's related to the community that we grew in. And so uh, I don't know. I don't know how else to introduce it. I don't even want to introduce it too much. I just want to get into it. So here is the topic for today. It is, drum roll, has youth sports become more important than education in the black community? I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about these type of topics, Zach, because we've been keeping it real light. We've been keeping it real light, a real
Yeah,
political, real PG. But at the same
yeah,
time,
yeah, yeah.
we wanted to get our reins. I think we are a bit more comfortable in, just figuring out the video setup and all that stuff and kind of get a feel. One of the things I want us to move forward to is speaking about things that you and I do speak about, things that are important to both of us and the community and particularly the youth, not just black youth, all youth, of course, there's that aspect to it. But we really want to speak in this conversation towards the black youth, black family, black household, and some of our value systems. And if that's actually something that is an issue, or is there a greater conversation? Is there a bridge within this conversation that uh, we can bridge? And that's the whole point. I didn't say it the best way, but you get the idea. So I'll intro it here, Deb. Actually, let me ask you first before we get into it. How are you doing today?
I'm good. You don't know.
Mm,
You
so
know, I have no clue what I just said, right?
I
What,
do.
like, I know.
You're gonna have to translate
Right.
for some of the fandom. So here's the introduction to this then, and I'm going to try to speak for what I think some of the voices within the community feel when it comes to this topic. Right? I want to be charitable to all different directions, kind of introduce it. When it comes to youth sports, a lot of people say, for myself, for a lot of people that we know, youth sports is a great way to get your child socially adept, right? If it wasn't for sports, there's a lot of good things that come out of it. A lot of the student athletes, even up to the university level, they find that even when they graduate, business wise, if you're not focused on sports, or those that have played sports and done other things, tend to do better in society, more adept, more well rounded. But from a youth perspective, um, some might say, okay, well, in the black community, there's a lot of troubled kids, for example. Keep your kids out of trouble. And one of the number one way a lot of the community or others would see it is put your kids in sports. If your kid is super physical or is having problem fighting all the time, get that kid in wrestling, get him in football, something like that, right? Other sports, sorry, basketball, tennis, better to get them in young, better to get them in at 5, 6, 7 years old. That will do them justice, right? That will set them up for success in the future. There's also this aspect of sports where nobody else in the family has been able to, quote, make it. And you might have somebody that's in the family that's good at sports. And because they're good at sports, the family looks at him or her as the golden ticket. And so there's a lot of pressure on that person to continue to play sports for the reason that that is the only way out from the family perspective, oftentimes. Um, and so that is something that has always been there, or you tell me if it's always been there. It seems like it's been there at least um, from the 90s forward. It seems that seems to be the focus for a lot of the families. So to that, what say you? And I'll just remind you one last time the topic: has youth sports become more important than education in the black community?
Yeah, yeah. I think so. But it's I have like as I said, I have mixed feeling on this one where the emphasis, if the emphasis is only on sports, or too much in sports, like as you said, that ticket, you understand how many people are not going to make it and not going to go on to the NBA. You're not going to go to the NFL, for example,
Hmm.
right? And there's clearly so that is that. I think people should just kind of look at the stats and see how ridiculous that stat is for you to make it in the NBA or the NFL or something like that. No matter how good you are, you're a good athlete, right? You did pretty well for yourself, but at no time I've ever heard you like put 100% that you're gonna make it to the NBA, right? Because it's that's a lottery, like it's literally a lottery. I think too many family member are only thinking about sport. I think it's an and, right. What they're saying is this is or nothing, right? You know that idea where they're talking about, well, this is the ticket out of the ghetto or out of that's
Right.
fine, but that shouldn't be the only way, and because you're just setting up the young person for failure in a lot of cases, and there are they usually always are enough examples where people made it out for people to look at that and pretend like that is the norm when that is like an outlier. And I mean, like that's a
Yeah.
isolated case. That is one in millions. And even if you made it, then there's another one in millions that you might not make it to the year five, right? So I think we as a people we have to kind of start as a people in general, but especially black people, black parents. Um, I think I earned that right because you were really good. One of your friends did make it to the NBA that you used to play with,
Hmm.
but at the same time, we have to be. I don't want to say realistic, but you still have to make sure that you push the effort for your kids. That a lot of I haven't seen many billionaires basketball player outside of LeBron and Jordan and a few. I don't even know if there's any more, but I've seen a lot of enough black billionaires,
Hmm.
right, from entrepreneurism and business ownership. So I think we have to kind of just make sure that we're not saying don't do sports. It should be and
Wait.
what?
So let me push back because this is again I'm gonna take the stance of what I think a lot of the our viewers watching would think and would want to be have addressed in this conversation. You played sports when you were younger, right? Right. I played
Yeah,
sports when I was younger. Um, you made me play soccer,
yeah,
right? But the question is now,
yeah,
did you force me into it? A lot of the parents, a lot of the families, um, that idea of playing a sport, whether they're going to make it to the league or not, they're living vicariously through their children, through their younger brother, through their siblings. Um, but again, if you're growing up in a household where you're you don't know math, your parents aren't, no, they're not well acclimated, you don't really know how to go the education route, sports might be your only way out. Do you disagree with that statement? The idea that in today's time, that sports is your only way out, or do you think? Because
yeah,
here's my take, and I'll tell you why I asked that. I think there's more of an argument to be made of that in 2010s, in the early 2000s, though the internet was still around. So there is that concept, right? Wikipedia, all those things were there. Do you feel like in today's time, that statement, if somebody came to you says, "Look, my son is not doing well in school, but he's 6'4" at 12 years old. I think he could really make it in sports, and they should put all their eggs in that basket. If they have money, just put him into a training camp. Just find him an agent to suit like just 100%. We know people like this actually. I think there's somebody that had
yeah,
asked you about that, and I think I had a conversation with them, if you remember. They wanted to have a conversation about that. And what do you think? Do you accept that? Do you accept anyone saying within our community specifically, coming to you say, "Hey, Roydell, like my son, daughter, like this is the only way that we're gonna make it."
I don't know about the only if we're gonna make it, but at the same time, I will even push back on the education part of it. We have to unpack what we mean by education too,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the same problem or the same challenges that we have with people trying to put everything in that you should uh, go 100% in sports. I think the same problem that we're facing now with education. So so even education is not, we can't just move from one to the other because now education is also being disrupted. And what it meant what it means to be educated, a degree and all that, it's not going as it's not a good enough investment. I'm not talking to, you know, I wouldn't bet against education, but we also have to make sure that we don't use the word education in this generic sense. What are you talking about when you say that?
Mm-hmm.
Because even a person who has a PhD these days don't have the any type of guarantee, just like the sports don't have, right? Doesn't have a guarantee either. So all of a sudden,
That's a good point.
I was even thinking about that because all of a sudden now it's almost like we're back where we began, because the same conversation, the same argument we can actually that we are saying for the sports, that I'm saying that we shouldn't go 100%. And I think we can honestly say the same thing for a lot of the educational programs these days.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the
And let
degree
me add to
programs.
that too. That's an interesting point because let me flip sides. The athlete aspect of it. There's only up until a certain age before you have to throw in the towel. What is that age? Maybe 25, and that's really pushing it. That's really by 22, you should have a pretty good idea. You would have enough scouts, you would have somewhat of a resume, probably get drafted
Mm,
D1, you probably go pro. So basically what you're looking at is post high school, you have a 5-year window where if you focus all on basketball, that's pretty much it. Now, if you go pro or any sport that you play, if you go pro in
mm,
Europe, things there's that aspect. But to what you're saying, this isn't how it used to be, where if you went and got a 4-year degree, you were guaranteed a management role, right?
yeah,
If you were in a role for 10 years, but you didn't have a degree, but you knew all the skills, they would not promote you to manager because you needed that piece of paper. Nowadays, that's
yeah,
not so much the case. Even if you were to go get your master's of business and XYZ and move on to a PhD, you're still not guaranteed any level. As a matter of fact, they're more likely to still put you in entry level and then try to get the most out of you as possible without having the
to pay.
corresponding right pay with that. So that's
Yeah,
that's not a guarantee anymore like it used to be. In other words, it's much more risky, but that's a risk that you'd have to take over 10, 12 years because it takes that long
mm,
to complete it, along with the
mhm,
additional debt that comes with it. Some people 50,000, 100,000, all 200, 250,000 for some of these
mhm.
degrees. So if you consider that and you put that up against the athlete, right? Make get out the,
Ah,
I don't, you know.
yeah,
Now it
yeah,
starts to become less of a trope. Would I still
yeah. I
do
see
it
where
though?
you go. Yeah, I see where you're going. I see where you're going with that. Because you introduced this, you introduced the this idea of 5 years, because there's a lot of things you can like reverse everything. Almost anything is reversible after 5 years. If you get to 26 or 27, and you put that five, let's say you put 5 years in going all in a sport, a
And
particular
that
sport.
would be just to be clear. You graduate high school at 18. You have seven
Yeah.
years before you turn 25.
Okay, right. So all of a sudden we can now say, wow, are we comparing orange with apples or apples to apple? All of a sudden it seems like apples to apples with the sports and the education,
Mm-hmm.
except if you look at the stats. the statistics for the sports is dismal, right?
Right.
So it's very unless you have special skills, and I'm not saying, and you can. So I don't think you have to do either or. I think you have to kind of go all in on the sport, but at the same time, make sure you're working on certain frameworks. Certain the education I'm talking about is not necessarily the education like just it could include that, but not exclude it. You get a degree and all that stuff. Talk about education like mindset, understand maybe finance, how finance really work, right? Like really understand investment, just by reading books, listening to tape, that type of education I'm talking about. Going into sports does not prevent you from doing all those things because you're listening to a lot of music, right? You could listen to some tapes, and these days you have a lot of LLMs and Chat GPT and things like that, open source. There's just totally there's totally different area we're living in. So you don't. That's why I say you don't have to be either or.
Mm-hmm.
You could definitely go in. I would just add that for the sports, the statistics is the issue because yes, you could just go all in um, for 5, 7 years. But if you go all in without acquiring all of those other skills, like framework thinking, system thinking, design thinking, understand how business, entrepreneurism, those type of education is going to be more important than education like a degree because education is becoming a commodity. Knowledge is becoming a commodity. Software development is becoming a commodity. A whole lot of things are just commodities now because you can do them using AI.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that's going to give you a unique selling proposition or something to differentiate or distinguish you from another person who have access to those same things is mental models and framework thinking and how you think, logical thinking, planning, and things like that. That's the only thing that's going to give you
Mm-hmm.
some kind of edge, right? So I think you all the parent have to do is just kind of make sure that the person who's even if they're going all in the sports, they have to simultaneously. It's possible now to do things in parallel because the way we acquire information before was to laboriously read books, right? We no longer need to only read books. We can listen. I don't even read books anymore. And I used to be an avid reader. I listen to the book, I turn the book into animation, into videos and all that. So I can capture that information and that knowledge much, much faster on the go sometimes. So there's no excuse. There's little excuse for a person who are going all in sports with with his eyes wide open, knowing that as good as you are, this is a very, very big world, right? Um, you, you can make it, and you should go all in if that's what you wanted to do. But at
Right.
the same
Right.
time, yeah, I think that's why I said it's not. It's and you can do this and that. The
So.
issue is not if you do. This is the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sports. People who play sports, they don't talk about these things. But people who play sports, the discipline that comes from sports and a whole bunch of other things, even physiological, has a positive correlation with learning. Right? That's one of the reasons they put physical education. That's if a person who's always tired and all that stuff, they can't learn. A person who is fit and plays sports, uh, they're they have a
Cognitive
reduction in
capacity. Yeah.
cortisol and they have a higher cognitive capacity to learn. It's just that what they're learning. So all we're saying is to focus that ability to something more positive. So that in case you don't make it, you you you
You
have
have.
the mental framework and capacity to survive the era, AI era.
Right. And so you mentioned the education. I agree with this aspect of two things that you've said. We haven't spoken about it here, but it's definitely important. You did say that we have to speak a bit more as to what's the scope? What do we mean by education? Right. I'm going to remind you two things that you said about education before that I've taken away from previous lessons, not on the podcast as of yet, but we'll get to it. Two of the things were same education isn't equal education. So I'll remind you of that one. And that
Yeah.
the second thing that I remember speaking about in another one of our conversation is that education has to serve a purpose. And I think
Right.
and I think those are two
Right.
things that are coming up here. When I think about sports, and I'll ask you the question, um, or I think it actually begs the question more in this case is there something that sports teaches you, right, from an education standpoint that you can't necessarily get from anywhere else? And you kind of mentioned some of those too, with the cortisol affecting and being able to stay aware and things like that. I definitely see the benefits of this. I know a lot of people that might be watching it that may know myself. You say, well, you played sports your entire life. Um, I did. I have. I'm very active and I've seen the benefits of it. Even now, I know when we spoke about it just before the podcast started, because we've done it and been an athlete. And again, being an athlete, you can still be an athlete without being on a sports team. If you don't know, now you know. But what that means
Right.
is that what that means is that you're aware of your body, right? You're aware of things that are off with it. You can kind of get a sense. And what athletes tend to
Yeah.
do is do something about it. Okay, let me start going for a walk. Let me go skipping. Let me do some push-ups. Let me change my diet for a week or two. We make those adjustments on the fly. This is what we do on the course of our life. So I think there's a lot of skills there. Do you feel? So I want
Trans,
to ask you that. Do you?
transferable.
Yeah.
Transferable skills. Yeah. Transferable skills. So yeah, I think sports, almost all team sport, especially team sports. The individual sport also teach you tenacity and you have to rely on yourself and all that. But in today's world, going out on your own and all that stuff that you see in books, like these people, you know, pull themselves up by the bootstrap. They're just not showing you their team, or they're not giving their team members any attribution to for the part that they're playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually, so team sports has a lot of benefits. Right? The awareness you're talking about, but it also teaches you to play with others, right? To I think empathy comes from that, like the awareness, as you mentioned earlier, just being aware of playing your part, moving in position, um, coming back from adversity when you've lost. You know what I mean? Like let's say you've lost a game, you've been blown out, coming back and play better next time and all that stuff. All of these things are just important things in life that just
Mm-hmm.
get you. But again, we're talking about all the good things about it. So let's just look at the other side, like the flip side of that. So a lot of people get good things from sport, like what I just mentioned, and a lot more. But also, if you're on a team and all their other players are just that much better than you might have this learned helplessness where you can just rely on LeBron. You understand? Like, so there are
Mm-hmm.
other slight negative, but overall, I think it's just positive. I think you can get those same things from in other means. You don't have to be on a sports team to get some of those things, but some of
Mm-hmm.
them are really transferable. And I think, oh, the last
And
thing on this topic
and
for
I'll
me,
tell you
the
I'll
last
tell you
thing,
why too. Go
yeah,
ahead. Yeah.
yeah, on this topic for me is when you look at like other race or other, maybe it's a class thing and race thing as well, right? But if you look at really rich people, because you went to one of those schools, right? Where all these rich people, those rich kids also play sports, and their parents will pay a huge amount of money to get those kids in sport. The question should be why? Because they're not trying, those kids are not trying to make it to the NBA in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of cases, those rich kids. But those parents will spend a lot of money to get one-on-one training, even though they know that that child is not going anywhere, not even in college in terms of making it in a college team.
Right.
yet they pay a lot of money. The question should be why? What they get from it is not this idea like I'm going to make it to the NBA or make it where something high in an area where it's hyper competitive and you have a 1 in 10 trillion chance of making it. What they're paying for is what we just mentioned, the ability to bounce back from adversity, to work well with others, right? To be coachable. These are the stuff that they're getting from that. So I think if the people who are just pushing just to make it to get financial reward from that, they might start seeing that there's a lot of qualities and skill set that you can get from sport that has nothing to do with money, but it has everything to do with money
Mm-hmm.
because of the soft skills that you gain from sports. Like for example, if you're a leader, you're a natural leader. Some of that comes from sport, like running in position. You pass the ball, you move in a position. You know where other people's are, so you're aware of the part that other people are playing. These are the soft skills that you need today.
Mm-hmm.
Not you. No longer you can just say, "Oh well, I'm really good at math." Therefore, no, everybody is good at math these days. It's access to computer, right? So what it's the soft skills that you get from sports that's important, and those skills value millions of dollars if you
Mm-hmm.
just kind of change your perspective and say, why? What am I getting from sports? Not just making it to the NBA where you have 1 in 10,000, 10 million chance, and then even if you made it, even if you were to get selected and you're in the NBA, you have a huge chance of having a sprained ankle or whatever, and then you're out. And even if you have a really good career, a huge chunk of those people are broke within 5 years after retirement, right? So we're only looking at the glitter of sports, where most people in sports don't make their money from sports. They make their money from endorsement, which you could say, yeah, well, sports give them that the notoriety to do that, and that's true. But I think entrepreneurism, mental models, knowledge, what the other soft skills that you can get from playing sports, I think those are more valuable for a lot of people.
Agreed. And so you brought up a
Yeah.
couple things there, and I agree with a lot of it here. So I'll just bring up some stuff. Remind me to get back to the, because I did go to a private school there, and that was a key point. The You mentioned the athletes, the ones that even when they make it, a lot of them are broke within the next 5 years. I think that speaks to what you had spoken to, which is some of those less talked about aspects, learned helplessness, right? This is something that happens a lot with a lot of the athletes with that coach athlete experience where you become beholden to the coach and you're expecting the coach to save you, expecting your coach to speak to your teachers, expecting to have certain exemptions when it comes to handing in assignments because you had games, because you have things like this, because, right? So you have a lot of those. And what happens is when you're no longer within the school, no longer within the league, some
Yeah.
of those skills, that learned helplessness is a factor. But what you also,
Support net support
right,
the support I was saying the support network is no longer there.
exactly. And, but you mentioned something about, you know, the school I had went to, a rich school, the private schools. So a lot of the things with the private schools is you're right, they do pay for their kids to be in the sports teams. As a matter of fact, and this is one of the main things that I realized having went to a Catholic school at one point, a public school at one point, a private school at one point. Um, some of the main differences actually when it comes to education, the private schools tend to look at it from a holistic aspect, where they care as
Right.
much of about your socks that you wear and the bed that you
Yep.
spread, as much as what you're doing in the classroom. It's almost
Yep.
as if to say that the education is not just within the classroom. Here's the
Yep.
interesting thing about it, I find, is that the reason why sports tend to have more transferable skills is because the way that they teach us in the classrooms, that isolated focus on you, don't share anything with anybody else, is not how the world actually works. The person that
Okay. That's
focuses
good.
on by themselves, The person that focuses just on themselves is not the one that wins. It's the one that recognizes, as we talked about, recognizes their team, right, and able to put their team in certain positions in order to actually achieve certain things. One of the things about the Stansted College, I'll give them a shout out here, is
Oh, you give them a shout out.
I'll give them a
That's
shout
good.
out. I'll give them a shout out. One of the things
Good school.
with Stansted is when it comes to the sports, 90, I would say 95% of those kids would never make any sports team at any private school, or sorry, at any public school within any metropolitan. It would not happen. They do not have that skill set. They would even make the B team version of that. And that's not just Stansted, that's how it typically goes. But you're right. I do believe that they send their kids there because, one, they would have an opportunity to do that. But not only would they have an opportunity, that seems to imply the fact that they have an option to take the opportunity or not. That's not how it works in private schools. And that's not how it works when it comes to getting into some of the top universities, Ivy Leagues, things like that. They want to see how well-rounded you are. So what I found being at the private school, you're taking SATs in grade 7, grade 8, grade 9. You're required to be in 2 to 3 sports per year. Required. You're required to also partake in a club as well, right? And so I think the approach that they're taking is to gain not only the team aspect, but these sort of transferable skills in all these different
Right.
domains,
Yeah.
and force your
Right.
capacity to operate on such a level.
Yep.
We're also building a network is sort of built into that experience. Obviously, it comes down to donations and things like that. That factors in later on when you have alumni and all that stuff. There's that aspect.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when we talk about education, I think what we found out in this conversation is very, one, we already knew it, but in this conversation, it's very important to define your terms. Education
Yeah.
is not just the going to university, graduating university. Education has to serve a purpose. And
Yeah.
what you're finding is that within our community, we agree, it's not a bad thing, the sports. I actually believe for a lot of Black youth, a lot of youths specifically, but I'll say within the Black community, it's a way for us to get exposed to how the world actually works in an affordable way. However, as we both agree, the mindset should not be just on the sport. And I think in today's time, which with AI, you have ChatGPT, things like this, there is no more excuses for you to go learn, right? And sit down with your kids and see it a different way. One thing I would like to see more of, and I'll ask you that question. One thing I would like to see more of is a diversification of not just sports. If we're going to get them in sports, you can find somebody on a Facebook marketplace or on a Kijiji or on, even if it's ChatGPT or somebody in your community, we have the network now. Let them learn an instrument. Let them be in a martial art, even though that's still within the sports realm. What else there? An AI, right? An AI course. Get them into a summer, not just a summer camp for sports, but a summer camp for robotics.
Yep.
A 1 week summer, things like this. We can put some of our capital into our kids to have those transferable skills that are beyond that, because that team aspects that we talk about with sports can most definitely be achieved in other aspects as well. I know for myself, having gone to, again, Stansted, joining the debate team, I found that I was more, and remember being an elite athlete, I was more intimidated about the debate tournaments when I went down to Deerfield in the States and all that.
Yeah.
Because you realize you can't just size somebody up based off of their physical attribute, their physical stature.
Yeah.
There was girls at that point that had been doing this, just like how you see with spelling bees and so forth, since they were, 8 years old? They have like 10 years of experience. These are veterans. These are giants within this space that you're about to go debate. And you have no idea, but you're trying to size them up from an athletic standpoint. And this is one of those things that I think we can really take advantage of in this AI space, is that we can diversify, and it does not have to be expensive. ChatGPT, things like that are free. We can do that. You can say, look, I'm not the best at math, but I did really well in this sport. Maybe help me have a conversation so I can teach my kids a little bit more about the math so I can be more involved. But let me go ahead and learn an instrument too, right? It's not
Yeah.
too late. So I think there's a
Yeah.
lot. I think there's a lot to be learned, but I'll give you the last word here. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's how I feel about it. I feel good, but I do think it's something for us to.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to explore. Like we like again, there every time I tend to bring engineering concepts over into regular life. In a similar way, I try to use like they say physiology before psychology. For example, if you want to feel better, if you start acting better, all of a sudden you start feeling better, right? Because the action is going to release different hormones and stuff like that. So all of a sudden you feel better. So I think the sports can kind of do that, where it could be the thing that leads to other, you recognize other value you're getting from it, not just this desire to make it to NBA or NFL or something like that. If you look at the highest value, if you look at people who make the most money, usually it's the person who can do public speaking, for example, right? A person who can speak. It's usually not the person at the bottom doing implementing things physically, right? So you have a person who can do is a public speaker. That person is going to make a lot more money, or just a better communicator. Even if he's working in a 9 to 5, usually the better communicator is going to earn more or be invited over to the picnic when the other person
Right.
is being shunned, right? So all of a sudden you've realized that communication that you will get from sports, the ability to talk within sports, all of a sudden that is the highest, one of the highest form of value creation is communication. The other one is imagination, right? Where you use your imagination, you just use your brain to make things up. I think sports, the most creative people in sports, I think the the crux, the thing at the center is creativity. So if you're creative in sports, chances are you would be creative in other things. It's transferable, right? If you notice that most people who are, say, a rapper or an artist, like an artist, like in a, not a paint, not a fine art, but artist, like
Mm,
audio, sound artist. If you notice those people, because they're acting all the time, when they go to Hollywood, they become, most of them become natural actors almost immediately. I think sports will do that for you if you look at it. It's just kind of start looking at it from that perspective also, not either or, but also and, right? So the most highest value creation is imagination, right? It's not physical. That's why I say physiology before psychology.
mhm.
And the other one is communication, right? Usually it's not just about physical things, even though that's also important. So I think once we start looking at this, as you said earlier, holistically, how the richer schools think about those things, we have to start looking at things holistically, and that is one solution. I'm not going to say that's that solution, but it's a solution. And I think that just better than just looking at for one thing, like, okay, this is an economic, it's going to create a lot of economic activities for me and my family, and if you don't make it, all of a sudden you think you didn't get anything from it, when you have a wealth of knowledge and expertise just from being in sport.
100%.
That's it.
And yeah, so that's it. And you mentioned the physiology there. One of the things when we're younger, when we were mad, you'd say, okay, whistle.
Yeah.
Let me see you,
Yeah.
right? Or when we did
Yeah.
presentations, to hold out your hands outwards, right? This is the,
Yeah.
reversing your
Yeah.
physiology, because when we are nervous, we tend to get smaller, right? And you would
Yeah.
say, take up
Take up more space in the universe.
take up more space in the universe. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's just
Take
what
up
it
more space
is,
in the
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you learn to do that in sports, right? On the basketball court, for example, they tell you to keep your arms out, right? Like
yeah,
take up
exactly.
work within a unit, be connected to things that are outside you. But again, what we
Yep,
need to understand is that those lessons can also be learned in other aspects, and ultimately, that's the goal. We want to parents, I'm sure, and for sons and daughters, you want to do well for yourself and do well for your family, and that's what we all want at the end of the day. And when it
yep,
comes to be it the black community or otherwise, sports play a huge role in it. But there's other
yep.
aspects of life that can equally help. Education must serve a purpose, and the purpose
Must.
must serve a purpose, and part of that purpose is to live better and help out the future and all that fun stuff. So we'll get back.
Yep,
I think
yep.
that's it. I think we did well with this one. I think we did
Yeah, I
well
think
with
that
this one.
one's well. Yeah,
It's
it
all
went well.
right.
It
It's
went
all
well.
right.
I want,
Something right.
I want to say one other thing. Next one, we should talk about like this education should serve a purpose. Because when you mentioned that, I remember you're going to say you don't remember it, but I'm going to. You're not going anywhere, right?
Mm.
No, the viewers still listening. They're still listening. It's cool. Okay, so I can do this short. So when you were going to Stansted, one day you came home and I was telling you like education should serve a purpose, and equal education isn't same education isn't equal education,
Right.
right? And then I have to explain it. So I'm explaining it to you, the viewers, even if it's just one of you, even if it's just you, it's okay. Talking to you. Education has to serve a purpose. So, for example, let's say our people, let's say we're not on the top in economic things and entrepreneurs, and so the education that we're getting should be one to take us from where we are and bring us to where we're trying to go, right? To the desired state. So we're here and we're like to be there. So education should be that type of thing to help you make progress to get from where you are to where you would like to be, right? That's simple that way. Education should serve at least that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Equal education is not same education. So, for example, Roydell was going to this very fancy school. Those are really good people. But at the same time, I had to tell him, okay, in the classroom, some of his friends would come to school in a helicopter, for example, and you and that person is getting the same education, and the teacher will say things like this: well, you guys going to be leaders of the world and
Right.
masters of
I remember that.
enterprise.
Yeah.
When they're saying that to those kids that their mom and dad owns corporation X, that is a true story. But for you, even though you're getting the exact same education, that isn't true for you. So
Even with just same grades.
with better grades, even if you're getting better grades, it's still their education is to maintain the status quo, to keep the wealth going. Your education must be to be acquiring wealth. Theirs is to maintain wealth or grow wealth, where yours is to create wealth. The education can't be the same. So that's what I
Mm.
meant, and that's what I mean by same education isn't equal education,
Is that what
and
you meant back?
education has to serve.
Is that what you meant back
Yeah,
then, or just now that
yeah.
looking
Back
back at
then,
it?
no, no.
were
Back
you were you
then and no,
lying
because
then, or you lying now?
no. Well, I'm
No,
sitting. I'm not lying. And I'm joking. But
no. I remember all of
yeah,
that. I remember all those
remember that
conversations,
conversation?
and
Yeah, yeah,
that's it, right? And that's the same education, equal education, and
yeah.
a lot of the ways to navigate we are not familiar with, right? We're coming to a system that the rules to us are not as clear. We didn't grow up with the same set of rules. Even something as simple as sending emails, right? The idea for us
Yeah,
culturally is to give trust. No, I trust you, man. Don't worry about it. I'll see you when I see you.
yeah,
In the corporate world, that's not it's not official unless you send the email. Hey, I'm just
yeah.
following up on our conversation last week. Where for us, I remember having to learn that that's not a show of disrespect. It's not a show that you distrust somebody necessarily,
Yeah.
but it's showing actually to them within this structure that, okay,
I
here's
saw
somebody that's
something like that.
reliable, that's dependable, that
Yeah,
understands, what
yeah,
we have to do here. Those are things that you have to learn. However, for us, that's more of a new concept. I know, for example, a
Yeah.
lot of the friends that I had at the university, they had family and, sorry, not family, but people that they had really close networks with, so much so that they can call in a favor. But when you ask them about their relation, they're not a friend, they're not family, they're just somebody that they know from when they're younger. Why is that?
Yeah.
That is because
Acquaintance.
the parents understood that dynamic. One may have a business that is complementary to another, and they would invite them over to dinner, whether they liked them or not. And so what would happen is they would have to play house, so to speak, and they invite them at the dinner table, and you would understand that, okay, this is how the business relationship goes. Mom and dad or dad are going to have their conversation. You guys go find something to do, and then childhood friend building networks like that. Those are things that is not necessarily accustomed to us. If we're spending time with you, we're either related, I like you,
Yeah.
or we got something
Yeah.
in common on the team or whatever. So these are
Yeah.
those are all the things. Same education is not equal education. A lot of
Not
those
equal
lessons
education.
too, not at all.
Yep.
A lot of those things, equality is not equity, right? That's another way a lot of people
Yep.
mention it. But yeah, I think we can definitely do that. You mentioned that conversation next week. We can definitely
Yeah. Yeah.
get into
Yeah.
that.
We could touch on that. Yeah. But you're
That
touching. You're touching it. Wait. You're touching on so many different things that like we want to make sure that if somebody's listening,
mhm.
we we're going to touch on that. But something even more important is where because you just mentioned something we're talking about systems. Growing up in Jamaica, we I used to hear a lot of people like in the songs, Babylon system, 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 system. But it's when I came to North America and then start looking into like engineering and control theory, the area of where people study one of the area where people study systems is control theory, right? And I believe so. What I try to do is take things from engineering, like from system science, and then transfer it over to social science, or because it's exactly the same thing. And if you understand how the system work, or systems work, we'll go to our one of our next podcasts. We're going to go through a kind of a discussion on systems and frameworks and how we tend to use those things in our daily life to get a better education since we're talking about education
Mhm.
and sport.
And there you go.
Yep.
And that's it. And
That's it.
that's a wrap. And look, philosophy and
That's it.
math. That's another one, right? A lot of people,
Yeah.
I don't do
Yeah.
math, but they love philosophy. People that do
Yeah.
math say I can't do philosophy. However, you get down to it, you get to the logic. It's all the same
It
thing
looks
at
like
the end of the day.
it's the
Interesting.
same thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly. Exactly.
That
You're
it's
deep
been
enough.
real. Audience, the rest of
Yep.
you guys joining the
Yes.
conversation at the table today. We appreciate you. Make sure to
Yes.
help us bridge those gaps. Leave your comment
Yes.
below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
In
Peace.
the next one. Peace out.